Hello and welcome to the City Club of Portland Friday Forum, Oregon's premier weekly civic affairs event. I'm Club President-elect Jim Zarin, and I'm filling in for Club President Don Williams, who's away today, doing whatever law firm administrators do when they're away. For those of you who are just joining us in the room here at the Governor Hotel, and for our radio and television audiences, please know that we have just concluded here in the room the 2007 Skidmore Awards ceremony, sponsored by Momentum Marketing Intelligence and publicized by Willamette Week, to honor exceptional leaders in Portland under 35 who work in nonprofits and who earn less than $35,000 a year. Now, as a follow-up to the Skidmore Awards ceremony, our forum topic today is today's nonprofit pioneers, recognizing a younger generation of nonprofit leaders. It will consist of a moderated panel discussion with the Skidmore Award winners themselves, to my right. But before our program, a few announcements. For the benefit of our radio and television audiences, we remind all of those in the room to turn off your cell phones and any other device that makes noise. It's not that we at City Club are against technology, it's just that we're more in favor of civility and being polite than technology. So we'll appreciate your cooperation in that regard. The topic for next week's Friday Forum on November 16th, a week from today, will be today's energy decisions, tomorrow's reality. Our guest speaker will be Gerald Chablis, Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Portland State University. He will discuss the possible ripple effects of today's energy decisions throughout our economy and our environment. Professor Chablis will also offer practical suggestions on how citizens, elected officials, and policymakers can make sound energy choices to ensure both a robust economy and a sustainable ecosystem. The City Club's New Leaders Council invites you to a screening and discussion of the documentary movie King Corn, which will occur at the Hollywood Theater next Wednesday night, November 14th at 7 o'clock p.m. King Corn follows Cheney and Kurt Ellis, best friends at college at Yale, as they move to the Iowa countryside in an effort to learn where their food comes from. The film raises intriguing and troubling questions about what we eat and how we farm. After the showing, filmmaker Curtis Ellis and a representative from Shepherd Grain, a co-op that's featured in the movie, will discuss the federal farm bill, which was discussed by our own Congressman Earl Blumenauer at this podium not too long ago. The speakers at this screening will also explore issues facing today's agricultural products and consumers. No reservations are required, and again, that's next Wednesday, November 14th, 7 o'clock p.m. at the Hollywood Theater. The very next night, Thursday, November 15th, from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m., City Club will host a discussion of the impact of the no vote outcome on State Ballot Measure 50, which, as you all recall, was a ballot measure that would have used a tobacco tax to fund children's health care in Oregon. Join Governor Kulongoski's health policy advisor, Ree Sailors, as well as Adam Davis from Davis, Hibbets, and Midgedal, Adam also being a member of our board here at City Club, and Len Bergstein of Northwest Strategies, who's also spoken at this podium recently, as they discuss what Oregon and the nation can expect when it comes to healthcare policy reform in 2008 as our elections approach. This discussion will take place at the City Club Commons, which is at 9th and Washington in downtown Portland. RSVP to Kim at the City Club office. Again, this panel discussion on the outlook for health policy reform in 2008, next Thursday night from 6 o'clock to 8 p.m. at City Club Commons in downtown. I now ask you to join me in welcoming 4 new members of City Club who are with us today. I would like each of them to stand and remain standing, and please hold your applause until they all stand. Our new members are Blake Nichols, who's a marketing specialist at Energy Managing Corp., Sarah Brown, an attorney at Yates, Matthews, and Eatman, and Tom Miller and Rebecca Aiken, and Tom is the Chief of Staff to Sam Adams on the Portland City Council. Welcome all, and thank you for being here. I'd also like to mention that today City Club invites everyone in the room who is not a member to become a member of this great organization. Those who join today will save $25 on the registration fee for your first year. Membership applications are on your table and in the back of the room, and please see a staff person on the way out at the end of our program. We particularly invite and encourage all of you who are visiting for the first time, and perhaps especially those of you who are younger and might be here because of the nature of today's program. It's a great organization, and there's a lot of new young blood, and it's wonderful. We encourage you to join up. City Club's programs would not be possible without the support and generosity of our corporate sponsors. Please join me in thanking Baron Liebman LLP and Girding Edlin Development Company LLC for their sponsorship this quarter. And speaking of financial support, as the club's president-elect, my main task this year is to make sure that the annual fund occurs and occurs successfully. And I want to mention that those of you who are club members either have received or soon will receive a letter asking you to make a contribution to this year's fund. About 40% of the club's operating expenses are paid for by our annual membership dues. We make up the rest primarily through this annual fund. And when you get your letter, you're going to have some snappy new inserts that talk about what City Club does and quotes some people in our community about the significance of the club in the civic world that we live in. And so we encourage everybody to make as generous a contribution as you can. Every amount will be helpful. And don't forget that you're going to get a kicker. And you might consider donating all or some of the kicker to the City Club. Now to our program. As mentioned earlier, today's program consists of a panel discussion on the topic, Today's Nonprofit Pioneers, Recognizing a Younger Generation of Nonprofit Leaders. It's highly appropriate that we have this program here in Portland and that it follows the Skidmore Fountain Award ceremony here in Portland. And I say that because as corporate headquarters have left our city over the last few decades, and as controversies about the business climate of Portland continue to linger, many worry about Portland's economic future. However, as Portland economist Joe Courtwright has pointed out to us, including from this podium, there is one definite reason to be optimistic about the economic outlook for our city and our region. And that's because of Portland's much vaunted quality of life, based in major part on the fact that Portland keeps being weird in all kinds of popular ways. The number of college-educated young people, age 25 through 34, moving to Portland is increasing at 5 times the national average for similar metro areas. Let me say that again. The number of college-educated young people, age 25 to 34, moving to Portland is increasing 5 times the national average of similar metro areas in the country. So in a 21st century economy, these educated, often entrepreneurial young people really are the keys to our and everybody else's regional and local economic future. So it's important we recognize this fact in assessing our economic outlook. And as we all know, it's not just enough to have a vibrant private sector and an effective and efficient governmental sector, but we also need to have a very robust nonprofit sector. So marrying up some of these ideas, it is fitting then that we take a look at today's panel of some of our young entrepreneurial leaders in our city's nonprofit sector. The moderator of our panel will be Mark Zusman, who I'll now introduce. And after I introduce Mark, he in turn will introduce the 4 2000 Skidmore Award winners who will serve as our panelists. As probably most, if not all of you know, Mark Zusman is editor of Willamette Week. He's also vice president of the board of directors of the Association of Alternative Weeklies, the trade association that represents more than 130 urban weeklies across North America. Under Mark's editorial leadership, Willamette Week was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Investigative Reporting in 2005. Here's another weird Portland thing. The only weekly newspaper in the history of the Pulitzer Prize to ever be honored for investigative reporting, right here in River City. Now, as a writer, Mark has freelanced for a number of publications. He was the Northwest Regional Correspondent for Business Week magazine. He's won a number of regional and national journalism awards. He's been a Rohr Fellow at the University of Oregon School of Journalism. He served as president of the Institute for Alternative Journalism, and for a number of years, he was a regular panelist on OPB's Friday evening public affairs television show, 7 Days. I also want to say that having received a voicemail message from Mark this morning, I also can attest that he leaves his telephone number on his voicemails to call him back very clearly and slowly. I could actually write it down without listening to the voicemail 4 times. I think probably many of you appreciate that, and I think for that, I think for that talent and insight, we ought to listen to everything he has to say, even if there's no other reason. Mark Zusman.
Thank you, Jim. So my number is 243. But we're going to get started. I want to make one prefatory comment. 4 years ago, Willamette Week undertook an effort to do something philanthropic for the community, to raise money for nonprofits that may not be very sophisticated in raising money for themselves, and to recognize people under the age of 35 who are doing very good and important work. It has been remarkably successful. Last year, we raised $250,000 after 3 years. And we're obviously recognizing and encouraging some very good people. There are a lot of people that are responsible for this, our partners at MMI and at Oak Tree and a number of people at Willamette Week. But the spine of this, the backbone, is someone who's going to be upset when I recognize him, but is my business partner for a quarter century, Richard Meeker. And I'd like you to stand up and take a bow, Richard. He has driven this from the very beginning and really receives not enough credit. Okay, today is a little bit different program for City Club. You're used to having speakers come up and tell you what's wrong. A problem infrastructure, a flawed tax system in Oregon. The other guys who's running for office is bad. Ballot measures that are wrong. Well, today we're talking about what's right. And what's right is reflected in the faces of these 4 people to my right. I had the chance to meet with all of them prior to today's meeting, and I can't remember the last time I've enjoyed a couple of hours. They are not your central casting social service workers. They're all unique. They all have their own passions. They all have some counterintuitive ideas that might surprise you. They all have some quirks. Neil, for example, is really into reptiles. You'll have to ask him about that. Casey met his wife at City Club membership. You may want to consider that for promotional purposes. It was very hard to spend time with them and not catch the fever of their energy and their passion. And I feel really fortunate just to have spent a couple of hours with them, and my hats go off to MMI who selected the 4 as well. My role today is to ask a couple questions and hopefully get out of the way, but I'm going to start by asking each of them, and the cameras are on now, so this may be a little bit repetitive, to introduce themselves to you and to talk a little bit about their organization. So Wendi Anderson, who is the who runs, operates, and is the founder of Giving Tree, can you just talk a little bit about what you do?
I'm Wendi Anderson, and I run the Giving Tree. It's an organization here in Portland that brings art, recreation, and education to people living in low-income housing or who are otherwise disadvantaged. And I basically do that by going into low-income housing and speaking with the residents and figuring out what their needs are and helping them reach goals, become more productive people in their lives through creative endeavors, learn to recreate themselves in ways that they never really thought possible because they've been so busy struggling in their day-to-day lives just with their poverty. It really opens their eyes.
Thank you. Neal Armstrong, who runs the Community Cycling Center. Can you talk a little bit about what you do?
Yes. Hello, I am Neal Armstrong. I'm the volunteer and event manager with the Community Cycling Center. And we believe that bicycles are a tool for personal empowerment and a vehicle for social change. Through our work, we hope that bicycles can help improve individual health, make a cleaner environment, and build stronger communities. My work with volunteers allows people from the community to come in and engage with the work that we do, helping us build bikes, help assist in our bike safety education programs, and help us with all the other activities we have going on.
Thank you. Zan Gibbs, who runs SMIRC, can you take a minute and tell us about what that acronym means and what do you do?
My name is Zan Gibbs, and I'm the supervisor for SMIRC, which the acronym is Sexual Minority Youth Resource Center, which is a little bit of a mouthful, so we just say SMIRC. And we serve an even larger alphabet. The acronym is LGBTQIPAA. And if I were to shorten that, I would say we serve youth that identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning, that are 23 and under. So if you picture a warehouse that's been converted by youth into their dreamland, you would picture a phenomenal 17-year-old's bedroom with a lot of fun activities. So what I do is I do a lot of counseling, I do a lot of suicide intervention, I do a lot of empowerment, I do a lot of skill building, I play a lot of pool, I play a lot of air hockey, I've seen a lot of drag shows, and I've given a lot of makeup tips to people you don't really want to see in makeup.
Thank you. And finally, KAYSE Jama, who runs the Center for Intercultural Organizing. Can you take a minute and tell us what you and your organization does?
Thank you. Again, I'm KAYSE Jama. I'm the founder and the director of the Center for Intercultural Organizing. Center for Intercultural Organizing is a grassroots, diverse organization trying to build a multi-ethnic, multiracial movement for the immigrant and refugee community. I think that's a mouthful, but if I break down and give you some quick snapshot of what we do, we have some couple programs that are very unique and I believe very innovative. And for example, one of them is called RISE, R-I-S-E, Refugee Immigrant Solidarity Education Workshop, which brings to not only immigrant refugee community members, but also local Portlanders to come together and to talk about and learn more about each other. We also have a diversity and leadership academy called Pilot, which brings about 15 immigrant refugees, first-generation immigrant refugees, providing them 12 months long leadership, and we talk a lot and we learn a lot, and we do have a lot of amazing understanding and sharing. So I will leave it there for now. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I've got a few questions, and all four of them are not obligated to answer. Hopefully one will answer at least one question, and obviously you should feel free to respond as you wish. But my first one is, how'd you get into the work that you do? Was there a moment of inspiration? Were you unemployed and you said, oh, I'll form a nonprofit? I mean, what was the moment at which you said, this is, if not my life's work, at least this is what I want to commit a lot of time and effort to? Anyone care to take that on?
I was in the casino business for 9 years. When I left the casino business up in Washington State, I was the youngest casino manager in the state. Blackjack, Pai-Gow, Baccarat, everything. And I was a great boss, but I hated what I was doing. I didn't like that I was hurting people and helping them lose their money. And I left. I took a while to snowboard up on Mount Hood and kind of go through some life changes, and when I came down to Portland, I just found my way into this work. It's something that I was extremely drawn to. I saw that there was a void that wasn't being filled, and I decided to fill it.
I didn't have that one moment. I was one of those 24 to 35-year-olds who come to Portland. I had never seen the city, and I came in here completely unemployed, but I had a couple passions. I had a passion for working with volunteers. I had a passion for exercise and outdoor activity. And while I'd like to say that I chose the Community Cycling Center, I'm really lucky that they chose me. I found an ad, and this was a perfect blend of everything that I wanted in a job. Like I said, engaging with the community and getting people active and excited to be out in the environment.
I definitely had a moment that brought me to the work that I do. And 11 years ago when I moved to Portland, I started volunteering for a mental health agency that served the lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender community. And through that organization, I met two youth. They were 14 and 17 years old at the time. And when they approached me, they said, "Zan, we just wrote a grant to the United Way for $50,000 and we got it. And what we want to do is open a recreation and resource center for sexual minority youth. Do you want to help?" And I mean, how can you say no? These youth were phenomenal. They were teaching me things that I didn't have any clue exist in the world. They were 14 and 17, teaching me about anti-racist strategies, teaching me about youth leadership, teaching me about how do you run an organization from the ground up and how do you start an organization as a youth. And so 11 years later, the model still stands, where it's a resource and recreation center for youth, by youth, and the youth still make all the decisions.
Well, I think for me also, when I came to this country, I came as a refugee, and soon after I came to Portland, I started working at the Lutheran Community Services Northwest as an African youth program coordinator. As I walked through that process, I learned a lot about the challenges that the youth of color and particularly immigrant refugee community youth face. Also, after 9/11 happened, also one night I was helping a group of Somali refugee women, and they were trying to establish their own organization. And I was the only male, and I was driving a van, so I was taking them back home. And as we were driving on the highway, they started talking to each other and sharing what kind of experience that they have in Portland streets. So one of them, for example, would say, "Oh, I was walking on the street, and somebody yelled at me a profanity and told me to go home. I was walking on the street, and somebody called me Osama. I was waiting on the bus, and somebody threw me a trash." And it really affected me deep because, you know, I am a male, and generally until I open my mouth, nobody knows whether I'm, you know, African American or immigrant. But those women really were bearing the burden of to be identified as Muslims. So from that moment, I realized that there has to be a place, a safe place, that local Portland community, whether they are immigrant or refugees, needs to come and really talk about the real issues and organize across the community. Thank you.
Thank you. What, if any of you find, are there any primary obstacles to what you do that people who are outside the nonprofit world might be surprised to hear? Bad question. No.
Oh, no, I'm just trying to narrow it down. Because I think there's insurmountable obstacles to the nonprofit work that we all do. Speaking to the work that I do, I mean, we see thousands of youth every year, and so the obstacle is that there are thousands of youth that we see every year. And so how can you possibly fill the need for all those youth, and each one of those youth has a very special and unique need. So I'd say the obstacle is just juggling. How do you best support and best facilitate leadership and empowerment and give them the tools when everybody needs a different tool? Because we're working on the assumption that they know what they need. We just have to give them the tools to help them build whatever it is that they need. So there's a lot of need and there's a lot of tools, and there's just not a lot of ways to give them all those tools for all the needs that they have. So I'd say that's definitely a huge obstacle.
I'd say that the obstacle for me is more of an opportunity to teach people in the general community that art and recreation are very vital for every one of our community members, and not just to those who can afford them. Most people think that when someone transitions from homelessness into housing, that once they're fed and they have four walls around them and clothing on their back, that should be enough. But it's not enough for any one of us. You know, you wouldn't be happy to sit in a room with a can of peaches and some secondhand clothes. And it's my job to teach people that, yeah, everyone deserves that.
And I think for me, definitely as an organization, we are ethnic organization. So just think about when we're talking about immigrant and refugee community, we're talking about a global community. So really language and cultural differences is making it a really challenge. Worldview and ideological differences is making it challenging. Different religious differences making it challenging. But if I come back to the overall and non-profit world, non-profit world is not an easy place to work, and especially if you are doing an organizing and not doing social service. So the challenge, definitely lack of resources, it's challenging. And also what I also observed is that the community, especially the non-profit community, there seem to be not cross-issue collaboration. So if you are environmental justice doing work, it hardly you can cross, and you just seem to be focused in that small box. If you're doing social justice, it's a similar situation. So really, the challenge is that really how do we come together and really create some sort of a interconnected social justice movement, whether it's economic, environmental, or social.
So let me key off that. How is Portland, what's its level of hospitality, if you will, to a nonprofit organization? I mean, all of you were not born and raised in Portland. You moved here. Is it your sense that this is a better and easier place to run a nonprofit, a more difficult, because there are more of them, I would gather? What's your experience?
Well, with my organization, I have a unique perspective where I really do feel that this town is very receptive to nonprofits, but this is also Bike Town USA. I work in an organization that people feel really connected to because they love bicycles, and they love getting kids and adults on bicycles as well. And through that, we have found that there is such an energy around the work we're doing, but we can always promote it more to those people who are outside of the bicycles, reaching those marginal bicyclists, such as families, such as minorities and women.
I would say that Portland is definitely a very welcoming place for the agency that I work for. It's known as a very liberal, sort of forgiving town, and I know that most cities still can't boast that they have a safe place where sexual and gender minority youth can go and won't get harassed and won't get beat up. And I think that those youth still get harassed and they still get beat up outside of our center constantly, and we hear those stories, but that the city can facilitate and has facilitated for 10 years a very large and very safe place where they can go every day that they need to and just access resources and hang out and have a good time without, the building being blown up or whatever other horrible things could happen. I think is a real gift and definitely speaks to the really supportive liberal atmosphere of Portland and the sort of attitude towards nonprofits. That we could even survive in a city is telling.
So when I was talking to some of these folks yesterday, I was a little bit tricky. I asked them about the role of government and whether they thought that organizations like theirs, which are small and nimble, and I think in the case of three of yours, your entire annual budget is less than $150,000 a year, whether you were more efficient at delivering services than governments, which do so, and they all said yes, and they talked about how they can be nimble and more flexible. And I then said, well, do you realize that you're in agreement with George Bush? And they all sort of backed up. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, about the role of government and where it falls down and how the freedom that you have is both a curse and a blessing, if it's relevant.
Well, I think first of all, for me, one of the questions we always ask that as we are not a social service providers, we are organizing agencies. So does the government is going to pay people who are organizing against it? So the challenge is that for us is that how do you really then do the work and also collaborate with the government agencies? And I do believe there is a role in nonprofit sector for solving community issues. So definitely, I believe that this role, we believe also the role of the government has been also the lack of providing a service and also not able to distribute the wealth equally among the members of this country. So we know there's a social inequality and we need to do something about it, but at the same time, that's where the nonprofit comes and fill up that vacuum. There could be a good example that where government and nonprofits can collaborate, and a good example is that the Center for Intercultural Organizing has been tremendously collaborating and having effectiveness with the city of Portland for the last year and a half.
Okay. Advice you would give to other members of the audience who are involved in nonprofits or are thinking about getting involved or starting one up. Is there a piece of advice you'd offer or a resource that you'd suggest that they consider?
Two very separate questions, Mark. Yes and yes, basically. I think in terms of nonprofits in general, not just in Portland, the most important thing you can do when working with or wanting to start up a nonprofit is really listen to what the clients want, what the constituents want. Like, who are you serving when you're going to be doing this organizing and this work, and figure out what it is that they need. I think every nonprofit would survive, you know, with great success if they had those constituents and those clients in positions of power and in leadership positions. And so definitely that would be my first piece of advice.
Is the implication of your question, are you being too polite to state it, but I'm going to state it for you, that too many nonprofits don't listen to their constituents, they listen to their funders? Is that what you're saying?
No, because I think you have to find a good balance. Because if you only listen to the funders, you might not necessarily be serving the clients. And if you're only serving the clients, you might not necessarily be getting the dollars. So it's always about balance. It's a real balancing act. You know, you have to stay open, but you have to listen to what they need. So it's kind of, you know, a little bit going back to what Casey said. There's definitely the distribution of wealth by the government is really skewed, and nonprofits, clearly 3 of us at the table work at organizations with less than $150,000 budget. You know, that's not a lot of money, and we're still balancing the needs and the demands of the constituents and the clients and the sort of needs and demands of the funders and the government that gives us money.
Well, one of the lessons that I've really learned through working at the Community Cycling Center is the importance of a clear message to the community. A lot of nonprofits that are starting off are full of energy, they're full of idealism, and they want to do so much, and they're just willing to work so hard to get their message out. But without a message that you can convey to the community to draw support, people aren't really going to understand who you are and how you are different from the other thousands of nonprofits that are here in Portland. And how do you differentiate yourself is so key when you're trying to gain supporters, when you're trying to gain volunteers and ultimately funders.
Let's talk about money, and specifically salaries and income. Nonprofits are notorious for paying people who work for them either nothing or very little. Is that correct? Is it a sacrifice that you struggle with daily? Does it occasionally make you bitter? How do you deal with it?
Well, speaking from someone who did run a casino, and I did enjoy making quite a bit more money than I do now, it's not something I struggle with at all. My rewards are completely in interacting with these people. I live a fairly simple life myself, and I would say also that I would feel a little bit strange living a life that was so much above and beyond the clients that I serve. I feel that I can serve them better if I understand where they're coming from, and where they're coming from is a place where you have to make choices in how you spend what little money you have, and I can help them make those choices because I make them every day.
I think for me, you know, I think generally we tended to focus as a society, we tended to focus a lot of infrastructure building. And I think sometimes we forget building human infrastructure. And that's, for me, that's the key. So people who are working in this type of field are people who came with passion. and compassion. And I think definitely we can make a case that as a society we need to really have a dialogue and public discourse about how do we build a human infrastructure, and that part of it also valuing people who work in this type of sector and providing a livable wage where they can raise their families.
I would say for me, it's definitely not a sacrifice at all, because no amount of money can buy the stories that I get to hear every single night from the teenagers and youth that walk in the door. And there is nothing that I need in life that I can't get on the salary that we have. I have food, I have housing, I have friends, I have family, and I have 1,000 amazing youth telling me the most amazing things every single day. And to me, that seems like a huge privilege. Honestly, Mark, I feel wealthy and rich in all of the experiences and all of the things that I see every day, and do not feel like it has been a heartbreaking sacrifice in any stretch of the imagination.
What do you like least about living in Portland? Or working?
I said the rain.
The rain.
I second it.
The rain.
I don't have an answer for that. I really do love Portland, and I come from Bellingham, and it rains quite a bit more there.
I think we love Portland.
Yeah. I absolutely love Portland. I would like to see a few more professional sports teams here. I'd love that.
Sorry, Mark.
I want you to each tell me something about yourself in the form of answering this question. At least from the outside, it strikes me that the work you do can be, I know it's very satisfying, and, you know, I believe you, but I also can imagine that at times it's emotionally wearing, either because of a lack of funds or the fact that, you know, you deal with 20 kids and then another 20 kids come through the doors, and, you know, it is a journey without destination. What do you find when you get away from work? Where's your center? What do you do that allows you to forget about this? Avocations, hobbies, transcendental meditation, what do you do?
I have a group of really amazing, supportive friends who I rock climb with and snowboard with, and those are two passions that I just adore. They allow me to forget about everything else and just focus on the moment, and that's something that's really important for me because I'm usually thinking about 2,000 things all at once.
Well, when I have a really stressful day at work, the moment I start to unwind is when I get onto my bicycle and go home. This is my moment to start reflecting and to just be by myself. And then, of course, when I get home, my wife and I have our 5 kids, which are 3 snakes and our 2 geckos, and we absolutely love hanging out with those.
There's a saying in the nonprofit world that you should never take your work home with you, and I call that bluff, because there's no way you can't take those stories home with you. And so I think you do need to find ways to deal with those stories that are going to be in your brain, 2,000 of them at a time. And so, like Neal and Wendy, I think athletics is a huge piece of it for me. I make sure and ride my bike to and from work every day, even if it's the pouring rain, because that 5 miles, that 30-minute window of preparation and that mental preparation and time to just zone out and be on my bike is really imperative. And then when I go home and take all those stories with me and all the energy I've just dealt with, you know, maybe 80 kids in one night with an insurmountable amount of energy, I take that out in terms of athletic energy as well, and decided that if I could train for something really, really hard, and I'm just going to go ahead and sign up for the longest race I can find, and decided an Ironman triathlon would be one way I could help cope with all of the stories and stress that I hear. So I kind of took it to the extreme level, but it worked really well for me. So I balance it out by running, biking, and swimming all the time.
Well, for me, I think generally, I definitely, whenever I have stress or challenge becomes apparent. Spending time with my wife is my, definitely my favorite. I have also friends and colleagues, and I am really like to talk to people and really have a building relationships, because I believe it's a key ingredient to succeed. So sometimes I also play basketball. I love basketball. I don't watch it, NBA shows, but I just love to play. So that's one way that I also do the stress release, and also I love movies. So just having an afternoon off and just going and seeing a movie is just one wonderful way to do.
Thank you. Zan, if I'm not invading your privacy, would you be interested in talking about your next nonprofit that you mentioned the other day?
Sure.
Which I think this group would find interesting.
For whatever reason, I decided it's not worth it unless I'm in over my head. So on top of Ironman training and working full-time at SMERC, I have 2 other volunteer jobs. One, I volunteer at the Dougie Center, and the other one is I took over another nonprofit to run in my spare time, which I'm not sure what that is currently. And the nonprofit's called Students Run Portland, which is an organization that was designed off of a really successful LA program. And that program trains at-risk high school students to run and complete the marathon. So in LA, they've got 2,000 students, high school age students, all at risk. 95% are students of color in inner city LA that complete the marathon every year. The idea behind it is that if you give youth that think they can't even make it through school a goal that they definitely don't think they can accomplish, which is running the marathon, then give them all the tools and training to complete the marathon. They cross that finish line and they say, wow, if I can run a marathon, I can definitely graduate from high school, and I can definitely do whatever it is I want to do. So the sister program of that is Students Run Portland, which is one of the other programs that I'm trying to work on and build up. And we have 2 different agencies that are collaborating with us right now and starting to get kids running. So the goal is to do a marathon before the summer.
Thank you. Let me ask, I don't know how much time I have left here, about training for what you do. You know, you all raise money, you all work with at-risk populations, you all manage people, you probably in your own way fix water heaters that are broken, and yet none of you have any formal training to do this. And I'm wondering, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but what are the opportunities for people in this town if they say, you know, I want to go run a nonprofit, but I'd like to get some training? Are there opportunities to do that? If not, do you have any recommendations?
When I decided to start the Giving Tree, I was given some really great advice, which was you need to go out into the community and talk to as many people as possible who run nonprofits, who work with at-risk populations, and see what they have to tell you. Just go into it as an open book and ask for their advice. You don't know anything, and they know that, and if you tell them that, they're willing to tell you how to do things. And so I did that, and it was really amazing. Beth Burns from Pear was totally instrumental for me because she was really excited about what I was doing and just made herself available to me and said, just anytime you have a question, go ahead and give a call. She's been a really fantastic mentor. And Marilyn Eichinger has been really great to me. She ran OMSI for a number of years, and she's a brilliant woman. And I've been very lucky that I had that advice and I could go out and get people in my corner. So that's what I'd say, is just reach out, because people are there and they're really excited about what they're doing, and they're really excited to teach you how to do it too.
There's an agency in town, and I swear they're not paying me to say this, but it's called TACS, Technical Assistance for Community Services, and that agency is a huge gift to Portland, and that is their job, is to help you as nonprofit leaders and entrepreneurs to do whatever it is you need to do. And I've been accessing their trainings for the whole 10 years that I've been here, and I continually go to their trainings because there's never an end to all the things you need to know and need to learn. And they just do some amazing workshops. They're all open to the public. They do ongoing trainings. They have manuals. They have support. They do one-on-one sort of guidance for people in nonprofits if you need that. So definitely, if you're looking at increasing your power in the nonprofit or learning more about nonprofits, TACS is an amazing agency that you should all tap into for sure.
I don't want to be a broken record here, but I'm going to say volunteer. There are so many organizations out there that need help. We have Huge ones, let's say from OMSI, that have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, all the way to the small ones that have one energetic person looking to drive a mission. And if you have a skill, or if you're interested in developing a skill, you can go in, speak to them, speak to the board members, gain access into the community's network, and through that you can gain the skills and start learning how to build this organization.
I definitely second tax is amazing resources for nonprofit community in Portland. But also I want to talk about the role of actually mentoring and having someone who can really walk through you through the process and building relationships. I have been blessed to know people who have been in this business for a long time and were able to help me and guide me and support me and provide me ears that can, when I have some challenge comes that I can listen to. Marjorie Heyman, who are sitting right across the table, is one of them, the executive director of McKenzie River Gathering. Another friend in Chicago who is a good friend of mine, also Eric Ward, who came to Portland and a lot of times supports us and trains us, and also I can pick up the phone and call him. So it's a relationship and networking and mentoring.
Let me ask you about local philanthropy, probably a rhetorical question. Is there enough money here? And more to the point, who seems to get it and who doesn't? Nobody wants to touch that.
I'll say absolutely there's enough money out here. It doesn't have to come in these large $100,000 or $1 million grants that everyone's looking for. It comes in the form of $25, $50, $100, you, me, my friends, my family, anyone that you can talk to, that you can just get your message out and get them really excited about what you're doing. Anyone who is able to give $25 to your cause, most likely next year will be able to give $50 or $100. So it's just a matter of getting them really involved, getting them really excited for what you want to do, and have them be touched with the work you're doing, and through that they're going to be able to help you.
I really believe, a lot of times, there is, especially the work that I do, there's definitely a lot of dollars that are going to the social service agencies, which is really great, but at the same time there's not enough money really is not going to the organizing and the community. So for me, really empowering the community and allowing the community to organize and expend more money on that process, that would be really a good key success. But definitely that would be one way to make a shift on who gets the dollar.
I think too, because there is so many nonprofits in Portland, one thing to think about is that collaborating with other nonprofits is really, really key in this town, because there are so many. There's not a ton of dollars to go around, and so why not share resources and why not work together? There's a lot of agencies that have similar missions and work with sort of similar populations. So I think that's one piece of it, is making sure that your collaborations are really strong, and the other piece is just making sure that your message is really strong. Because I think if people hear your message and know exactly what you do, that's really going to resonate with them. I think when I see, for example, older gay men come into the Smirk Center, their reaction is unbelievable and so beautiful, and they say, if I had had a place like this when I came out in the 60s, when I came out in the 70s, and it wasn't okay to be gay, my whole life would be different. And so when they see that and when they experience those things, it's that personal connection, I think, that really ties you to not only to the community, but to the people that are going to help support those organizations.
Let's talk about the future a little bit. None of you, at least as far as I know, have endowments. You're all running small organizations, in 3 cases really small. They all depend on your broad shoulders. What are the prospects in this environment, in this economy for your organizations? And also with that, where are you going to be in 5 years?
Also, 2 very different questions. I think, firstly, at least with the Giving Tree, we have a fairly low overhead because we're going into the housing complexes rather than basing ourselves out of office space, and that's really good. So I can cater the programs that I bring to the people based on how much money I'm getting. Now, of course, I would love to be able to fly them all to Paris, but that's just not going to happen anytime soon. But I think that we are very strong in our basis for making it in this environment simply because we do have that low overhead. As for where I'm hoping the organization will be in 5 years, I've been told that that I need to build the organization so that it can run without me, if at all possible. And right now, I love the organization, and of course, I want to be there, and I don't want it to be running without me, but I would like to build us up to the point where I've got lots of people who are also very passionate about what it is that we're doing at the Giving Tree so that I could move on if I needed to and start another nonprofit organization.
Well, I think for us, for example, the Center for Intercultural Organizing, we run this organization almost more than 3 years for volunteer only, and we were able to attract a lot of people. And I think what people connect is that what Sen said earlier, if you provide a clear vision and mission, and also allow people an opportunity where they can believe and understand that they can have an impact in the community, that in their own neighborhoods, I think that's the biggest success, and I think that's where the future of the nonprofits, I believe, should be, where as many massive people, giving $1 might be $5,000, especially folks who has the resources, maybe it's great, but maybe one thing will be to do is also to go and involve and know the organization that you are giving the money. So I think for us that will be for me what I see in the future, and also definitely to encourage the younger generation is to collaborate and build a network and cross race, cross culture, and cross ethnic communities.
Our organization is at a wonderful point right now. We have some amazing leaders, some board members, our directors who have helped refine the message and really created a solid place for the Community Cycling Center in the Portland community. Where we're going to be in 5 years is where we're heading right now. We are granting access to children, to adults that don't have bicycles. We're getting more people out on the street and bringing the word of bike safety, the importance of safe urban riding and wearing a helmet. Our goals in 5 years are to get more people aware and make more people accepting of bicycles as a cultural norm.
We have a lot of 5-year goals because we always have goals. But there's a huge need in the community for housing for gay, lesbian, bi, trans youth, because over 50% of homeless youth identify as gay, lesbian, bi, trans. And we're in the process of surveying all the homeless youth in the city, and the statistic we got yesterday was 66% of Portland homeless youth are identifying as gay, lesbian, bi, trans, queer, and questioning. That's a lot, and those youth don't necessarily have safe options when they're going into transitional housing, because those transitional housing options might not be supportive. They might not know what to do with a transgender youth, like which dorm do you put them on? So one of our goals is, what if we could be the sort of hub that not only provided resources and recreation, but also we had our own specific transitional housing program where we could get those safe places for those youth to live and get off the streets. Another big goal is we would like to be open every day. Currently, we're only open for services 3 or 4 nights a week. So that gives you a good 3 to 4 nights a week that we're not there, where they are out on the streets, or they are unsafe in their suburbs, or they're in high school struggling and really wish they could come in for counseling. So if we could just be open every day and then have houses for every single homeless youth, we would be doing great.
Thank you, Mark. Now we're going to turn to questions from our audience. Our first question will be asked by our board host, Liz Riley. Liz, you can come on up. Liz is a consultant with the Collins Group, fundraising consulting firm here in Portland. Outside of work, she's a board member with Bola Moyo, an organization working to promote behavioral change among youth in Malawi, which is in Southeast Africa, where as a Peace Corps volunteer, she was a teacher and community development worker. Liz?
Thank you very much, Jim. You pronounced it right. And I just want to say congratulations and thank you to all of you also. The Gates Foundation has been infusing millions of dollars into nonprofits that specialize in biomedical research, believing that the nonprofit sector can be more responsive than the for-profit sector. PATH is an example of a nonprofit that has led innovation in research to develop vaccinations for diseases that are especially devastating in the developing world. What are some of the ways in which you feel your nonprofit can respond more quickly or creatively to a community's needs than a governmental or for-profit entity?
I feel that nonprofits bring a more human aspect than a large corporation or the government can bring. That's kind of the beauty of it, because so many of us are grassroots, and we are doing this with empathy and compassion in our hearts, and we respond to the whole human when we're dealing with these people and not just statistics. And that's where it can be really powerful for the people we serve, and for us it makes an impact on everyone involved.
Well, I think for me is, again, when I'm going back to, we believe as an organization that people who are affected, the issues that we are working should be taken a leadership role to solve it. So for us, it's really going to the deeper into the community and allowing the community to empower themselves. So for us, one way we can meet the community is basically really giving the power in the community and empowering them to make the changes that they desire to see happen.
I think for us, it's that we just have a very compassionate and human and real approach to it, because I'm not outside the agency. I'm not just a funding source. I'm the one that's there on the floor with the youth. And I think if the government or the funding source was there too, they would also have a very different approach. But that, I think, is what makes it really successful as a small private nonprofit, is that it's just so real and it's so there and it's in your face every single day.
We believe that the profit world is going to look at business through, say, a financial lens. We're going to look at the work we do through a social lens. We want to be working hands-on, on the ground, with the people who need the services. Where, not to say that that there aren't for-profit businesses that aren't working directly with people, but we want to make sure that every act that we're doing is working for the people and giving them access to the skills and the education that we can provide them.
Okay, we have time for just a question or two from the floor. I just remind everybody that asking questions at these forums is a privilege of City Club membership, and that questions do end with a question mark. So go ahead. And maybe if you could address your question to all or individual of the panel.
Eva Schweber, City Club member. This is actually for all of you. And there's a lot of discussion right now, and there's more groups than I can count, working on the generational transition as you have boomers retiring, both from their board seats and leadership positions, but also out of the private sector, and then wanting to give back and either take lower paying jobs in the nonprofit sector or volunteer. Since the focus of the conversation has been primarily on the boomers, but as the younger end and leaders, and as leaders in the nonprofit sector, I wonder what your thoughts are on this transition as we have multiple generations transitioning in and out at the same time.
That is a really good question. We do a lot of intergenerational work, even though we're a youth program. I supervise not only thousands of youth, but 75 adult volunteers that come into the space. And I think the gift that they bring as adults and volunteers in the space is so huge. And we've definitely noticed with our retiree volunteers and the volunteers that are soon to be retired is this amazing sense of compassion and passion that they bring. And in essence, less stress and sort of issues of being jaded. And it's been one of our goals to do more and better outreach to those communities, and they have so much knowledge and so many gifts to give to our youth and to us as an agency that I think there are plenty of ways to bridge kind of those intergenerational gaps. And speaking for my specific agency, you know, we love to have those gaps bridged and those retired folks come in and be a part of the agency, even though it's a youth agency.
One of the really fun things that I do at the Giving Tree, I work with children and adults. And what I do is I'll have service days with the children where they'll come into the adult housing, and at Christmas time they'll hand out stockings to the adults that they've stuffed themselves. It has a huge impact on the adults because they don't really get to see children anymore. Most of these people don't really have family. That's why they're living in SRO housing. They don't really have anybody else who can support them at this time. And so it's very powerful for those children to connect with the adults. I've also had adults from the SRO housing come in and volunteer with the children during the summertime, reading them stories and playing with them and teaching them old craft tricks and things like that, and that has been really amazing as well. It's been fantastic for all of the generations that I've been reaching out to.
I really enjoy a certain aspect about our volunteer program, that we hold these drop-in volunteer nights that provide access to anyone and help us with our programs. And this is a perfect bridge between, say, the retired volunteer who's very, very interested in bicycles, and then also the young hipster Portland bike enthusiast. And together they're working together, and often one side or the other knows more about bikes, bicycle mechanics, or leading groups. But together I see them working together on this kid's bike, and together they know that their work is going to be benefiting this low-income child who's going to get this wonderful bike for the holidays. It's really a lot of fun.
Well, I second everything that's been said, but I think for me, I'm going to look into two different ways. Number one, first of all, as we know that there is a definitely in retirement itself in the nonprofit when baby boomers are retiring next 5-10 years, and that will really create an amazing opportunity to have that leadership shift within the nonprofit community. So I'm really excited that shift that will happen, because I think it will really re-energize the social movement and the non-profit sector itself. The other area is that for us, as an immigrant refugee community, we're really new to this country. We come from a different ideology, as I said earlier, and also even the elders have a leadership role in our community. So how do we bridge this gap has been really a question that we have been struggling because we have a different concept of leadership. And one way that the center has been addressing is that what we decided to do is to create intergenerational leadership development programs where an older generation and younger generations can come together and learn, because elders in this part of the world, especially immigrant refugee elders, they feel like they've not been really listened and heard by their youth, and the youth are really getting to the American leadership style and just being go-getters, and that really creates a challenge. So definitely addressing that intergenerational leadership is a key element of our programs.
Our time is up. We need to stop. I want to thank the sponsors of the Skidmore Awards for 2007. We're very glad they joined in with the City Club for this special day. I certainly want to thank Mark Zusman. Thanks, Mark, for doing this. But most of all, I want to thank Wendy, Neal, Zan, and Casey. You give us a lot of reason for optimism and hope about the future in our city. Thank you for being you. I'm sure you'd say thanks goes to all the other people like you that are out there in the trenches. As a small token of the City Club's appreciation, we have year-long memberships for these 4 people for City Club. We hope they get involved in our organization. We could sure benefit from them. But I'd like to have everybody give a really great round of applause to these 4 wonderful people. We're adjourned.